Hi, let's crack management exams. Welcome to this new session brought to you by Unacademy, India's largest learning platform, where you get the best possible learning material for aiding your management dreams to crack exams such as CAT, GMAT, and more of the like. My name is Anand Venkatesan, and I'm an educator with Unacademy. Let me tell you briefly about myself. I am an engineer by background, did my engineering from VIT Vellore in the field of electrical and electronics engineering, and then I did my post-graduation from IIM Bangalore. Having gained some experience in the FMCG marketing sector with working with India's largest FMCG company, I then decided to shift career into the field of education. For the past decade or so, I have been training students through a variety of aptitude exams. These include the CAT, the GMAT, the XAT, IFT, and many others. I am a quant instructor, but I also help students with the verbal section, but also with personality training and tackling the personal interview and essay writing stages, which is where I believe I create a lot of value and I'm met with a lot of success. In fact, success rates in the past have been close to about 60 to 70% when it comes to the top, just the top 3 IIMs in fact. So that's what I do. That's what I've achieved in the past. Let's also quickly talk about Unacademy and what you get on the Unacademy platform. Well, like I said, it's pretty much everything you need to prepare for these exams. That includes classes, lectures by educators, live quizzes and tests, structured programs that make sure that you prepare in a continuous manner, and unlimited access to all of these resources on the Unacademy app. I did mention educators. Well, like me, there are thousands of educators on the Unacademy app, and these are educators who are subject matter experts. They've trained students for multiple years. They've taken the exam themselves, but more importantly, they've also clocked these kind of minutes on the Unacademy platform. You can see thousands and lakhs of minutes on the Unacademy platform. It means that they also know how to deliver courses online and how to interact with students in a virtual sense. Once I'm not sure if you've experienced the Unacademy app yet. I would really encourage you to sort of download the app, because without any exchange of money, you can actually experience the platform through something called special classes. But eventually, you will need to upgrade to one of these programs that we call Plus, right? And once you take a Plus subscription, it really widens the scope of your engagement on the Unacademy app, because suddenly you find that there are a lot more lectures, specific topics, and educators who are available on the Plus courses. More importantly, these educators come together in the form of big batches. So these batches can aid your preparation at multiple stages of your prep. So I mean, you'll have batches that will deal with basics. You'll have batches that deal with practice sessions, and calculations, and some that will focus on the softer aspects such as personality training and essay writing. Well, how do you access Plus? All you need to do is subscribe to one of these subscription plans, and that should get you on your way. You can see that subscription plans start from as little as a month long, but can stretch all the way to 12 or 24 months, which I believe should be the ones that you should prefer, because if you're looking at this year's CAT or the next, give yourself enough time. Give yourself time to sort of not just prepare for the written test, but also for the personal interview and WAT stage, which can sometimes extend all the way to the month of May, right? So keep that in mind. And another short note here is the fact that if you use my referral code at the time of purchasing a subscription plan, you get a 10% discount, right? So what are you waiting for? Download the app today and start building your, start experiencing the app, and at some point in time, I'm sure you will choose to subscribe to Plus, because I'm pretty confident that the Unacademy app will impress you. Right. Now that we've, now that you know me better, and I've also made a pitch for the Unacademy app, whereby you can interact with me. In fact, I have a lot of batches that are going live on the Unacademy platform. Let's focus in on this session's agenda. That's topic of today's lecture is know yourself. Something that knowing yourself is something that really helps you to prepare for your personal interviews. I know some of you are probably thinking, why this early, right? Well, it turns out that if you know what are the important areas, important sort of focus areas of an interview, and you are also able to evaluate yourself on each of these areas, sometimes you find that there are gaps, and if you know that there is a gap and you want to plug that gap, given that the interviews are still 4 to 6 months away, you probably can do something about it, right? So that's the idea of starting early. Besides, the earlier you start, the more time you get to draft your answers, the more time you get to read up around your chosen topics and chosen domains, and chances of success are that much higher. Okay, so how might what is the agenda for this session? Well, I'm going to quickly talk about some basic aspects of an interview, right? Interview basics for dummies, you could probably think about it as that, but very soon we'll get into some of the major portions of an interview. This includes the introduction, then dealing with career plans and goals, and then deal with academic questions on your curriculum and your past graduation. We'll also talk about some very, very important areas of your profile that include the positions of responsibilities and extracurricular activities that you've done. And finally, we'll close with one of the most important questions, which is why should we select you, and why do you want to join this college or this university or this particular program, right? So you can see that it's a session that very, very quickly will cover, will deal with and touch upon every important area of a personal interview. Well, it doesn't matter if it's a B school that you're applying to, or whether it's a job that you're applying for. The basics of an interview nonetheless remain pretty much the same, right? So let's dive right in. We start with the basics of an interview. Well, I'm not sure how many of you have actually taken job interviews or have sat for campus interviews, or maybe other B school or college interviews. But one question that I regularly face, people ask me all the time, it's kind of funny that you need to ask me this, which is how should I present myself in an interview? What is the ideal dress code for an interview? Is there one, and what would that be? Well, given that most of the time you're interviewing either for a job at a corporate, at a company, or you're interviewing for a seat in a prestigious or a reputed institution. Both of these are extremely formal situations, and you need to be at your professional best, and sometimes your attitude and your demeanor can actually be dictated by what you wear, right? So quite simply, I'm going to say that anytime you're considering what should my attire be in an interview, go with strict formals, right? I know that leaves a lot to be desired. What do I mean by strict formals? Well, a formal shirt, formal trousers, no jeans allowed, wear a formal belt, nothing with those fancy buckles that will stand out. No, professionalism dictates that you wear a subtle belt, something which is plain and simple and yet impactful, right? So that's the kind of attire that I'd suggest, and obviously formal shoes at the bottom. Well, do I need to wear a suit or a blazer? Well, yes, it can help. Sometimes it just makes you feel a little more formal. I guess it depends on weather conditions in the location that you're going to interview. So if it's, for example, the north of India, from this moment onwards it's going to get colder, So wearing a blazer or a suit might actually be a good idea. If you're a girl, by the way, then what does business formals mean? Well, strict formals would actually mean a business suit, right? Even for women, that there are Western formals that you can wear. Well, you can also wear traditional Indian clothes like a salwar kameez, but make sure that that's not something which is showy or flashy. I think it should be simple and formal, right? So basic colors, not too flashy, and not keep it plain and simple. I guess would be the mantra here. Prefer to wear business formals, but if you don't have one, then women candidates can probably wear Indian suit or a salwar. Okay, I did talk about etiquette and attitude. Well, in an interview, it's absolutely essential to maintain the correct attitude, right? Something that this is like below the line. Most people don't really see it, and even if they see it, they believe that it's their personality and they don't need to work on it. Well, think again, to be honest, because an interview is a formal situation, right? And if your attitude is not in the right place, remember, it's a subjective position that you're in, right? You have a panel sitting at the other end of the table, and these people are judging you. And when judgment is upon you, you better put on your best behavior, right? What that means is in terms of the kind of haircut you have, the kind of you should ideally be clean shaven. Don't have those fancy goatees or beards. Ideally, keep it subtle, keep it simple and plain. I think if it's possible for you to be clean shaven for the interview, I think prefer to do that. More importantly, for an interview, make sure that you also carry this attitude of being polite and yet assertive, right? But what that means is that make sure that when you're answering the question posed by an interviewer, that first you pay deference to their position and their seniority. But having said that, I think it's also important to assert and hold your own in an interview. You don't have to look servile. I think it's a fine line that you need to sort of walk to be assertive and yet not be aggressive or not to show arrogance in an interview, right? Believe that you will do well, reflect that attitude, but also be eager to please them, right? I think that's ideally something that you should be doing. Another mistake that most people make is in that in their over eagerness, they seem to surmise that they know what the interviewer is asking them and tend to cut the interviewer short, right? That's one of the worst things you can do to an interviewer, right? I mean, if somebody were to cut me short while I'm speaking, I would immediately infer that this person either doesn't respect me or doesn't care about what I have to say, right? And both of which are not thoughts that you want to let the interviewer think about, right? So better is to sit back, allow the interviewer to say his bit, and at the end of it, when there is a question asked specifically at you, maybe then you can begin to answer it. If you feel the need to think about it, again be polite but aggressive and say, sir, may I think about this for a couple of seconds, right? And take your time, right? If you need to feel if you feel the need for a beverage or a drink of water, go ahead and do that, right? So remember, it's a meeting between equals, but you're not really equal, right? It's a meeting between equals where where one person needs the other more than the other way around, right? So keep that in mind when you're in the interview, when you're psyching yourself up for the interview. Make sure that you walk in with the correct attitude. And finally, and this is while this is the last point, this is certainly not the least point, be professional both in speech and conduct, right? What that means is that when you're speaking, make sure that you only converse with them in the language that you're spoken to. More often than not, this is going to be English, because it's a B school and the corporate world is where you're going to enter. So English is going to be the medium of communication there most of the time. So speak in English. But if the interviewer indeed asks you a question in Hindi or another regional language, then you can probably answer him back in the same language. But more importantly, I think it's not so much about language, it's also to avoid the use of slangs. I know that in the recent past, with the boom of social media and communication on it, we tend to use a lot of these short forms and use a lot of these slangs. In fact, we also tend to contract words, like instead of saying you are late, you're saying you're late. Right? So try to avoid such contractions, try to sort of be precise with the words that you speak in an interview, because that really does make an impression upon the person at the other side, right? So it's better that you be formal, that you be slow, that you be deliberate, and that you do not use slangs or short forms or informal words, or even a lot of us have this tendency of rolling over into Hindi when we want to make a thing, like using words like ki, matlab, right? Try to avoid doing that. But I guess for some of you it might actually be this part of the way you speak and very hard to change. Well, if you can't really change it, maybe it's all right, but it's really not the most important point. But if possible, I would really suggest that you change your try to change the way you speak in an interview. Okay, now that we've dealt with the basics, right? How to look like, how to act, and how to speak in an interview. Let's get into the first thing that happens in an interview. You go in, you sit down. Remember, only sit down when asked to. A lot of times when I take interviews, when interview panelists speak to us, they tell us they really do test the conduct and etiquette of an interviewee by waiting to see if you seek permission to sit down, right? So it's always a good idea to ask for that. Unless asked to, do not take your seat, and by all means never mistake their friendliness for friendship, right? Because remember that the table that you're sitting on, that the table that they're using is theirs, it's their territory, right? Which means that you don't get to put your elbows on the table and act informally. I think you should sit back, rest your back against the chair, and look straight in the eye, be rigid in posture, make sure that you sit erect and you look them in the eye when you speak, right? I think one other thing about attitude is also to pay attention to every interviewer, right? If there are indeed 3 members in the panel sitting in front of you, make sure that when you're answering, you look at each one of them in turn. Don't answer back, or don't look at only one person when speaking and ignore the other 2. Make sure that you look at everybody in the panel when you're speaking. I don't think I need to explain what an introduction is. When you walk into an interview, once they give you permission to sit, they usually tend to ask you to fill them in on who you are and what you're all about, right? So they'll probably say something like, please introduce yourself, or tell us something about yourself, and so on and so forth, right? Remember that the reason why most people do that is because they'll have your interview form, they'll have the essays that you've submitted in front of them. They probably might take the first minute or so to sift through your answers, to sift through your profile and academics, and and so on and so forth. So since you know that that's the case, ideally what you should do is you should think that it should maybe take them under a minute. So I'll probably start with a prepared introduction of around 30 seconds, 30 to 45 seconds maybe. But since they might not finish looking at my application in the first minute, I probably should be ready to go for a couple of minutes or so, right? Which means that you need to have 2 versions of your introduction. One which is short and crisp and contains only the main important points, and then a follow-up for the next minute or a minute and a half, whereby you expound explain maybe some of the points that you mentioned previously in the first 30 seconds, or maybe add newer points which you believe are not as important as the first, right? Essentially, always present your best foot forward, and assume and prepare for the worst, right? The absolute worst is that you don't get enough time to say everything that you've decided. So better thing is to be safe and to finish everything in the first 30 to 45 seconds when given a chance. Right? So that's about the length of the introduction, but essentially what should you include in your introduction, right? What areas, what things should you be telling about yourself that will probably impress your panelist? Well, if you've attended my last session, and you should know that the CV and the personal interview stages are usually sales pitches, right? And a sales pitch is incomplete without the tagline, without the unique selling point, right? The tagline usually includes some product attributes that are unique to you, that are specific to only you and nobody else. So this is what is known and understood in the marketing world as the unique selling point, or USP, right? So what is our USP should be clear in an introduction, right? A simpler way of understanding USP is to think about describing yourself by the way of 3 adjectives, right? I say 3 because it's notional. If you can come up with more than 3, feel free to include that in your introduction. But these are the 3, adjectives about myself that I will put forward as a claim. And once I put forward in the claim, I can then utilize the rest of my time, maybe the couple of minutes after your main introduction is done. You could reserve to justify your claims, to justify why you're good at so and so, right? And to provide evidence against the same, right? So ideally, yes, about 30 seconds should be enough to introduce yourself. Should you tell him or her or the panel your name? Should you tell them where you studied class 10th and class 12th? Should you be telling their marks to him or her? Well, I honestly would say that I am not sure, because interviews are subjective processes. So each person tends to think differently. But while it is indeed subjective, which basically means that the impression you leave on the interviewer depends a lot on his or her attitude, there are still regions where you can impress him, right? And the USP should be one of those, a few of those, impactful things to say about yourself. The second thing that you can imagine as part of your introduction is to talk about domains or regions or areas that, well, it's not geographical areas, these are actually, discussion areas or topics that you are most comfortable with, right? So can you mention some specifics about yourself, about your profile, about your achievements, about your unique selling points? Maybe first up is that you start with a short list of what do I stand for, right? What are the adjectives that would define me, right? And then find evidence for such unique selling points. Evidence is absolutely critical, right? You can't just say that I'm good at communication but not have any public speaking or interaction within or without or outside of the school which demonstrate initiative, right? So there you go. Easier to say that I'm somebody who has initiative, but can be quite hard to justify, right? So unique selling points. Well, how do you generate these unique selling points? How do you generate some adjectives for yourself that adequately and accurately describe you? Well, I think something you can do is that you can look at your achievements, look at your CV probably, and look at whatever you have achieved, whether it was at school, college, or at the workplace. Your resume, probably includes your achievements, probably includes the main initiatives that you have taken, right? So if you can recount one or more of those and then use that as an evidence to present what your quality, appreciable quality is, I think that would be a better way to deal with this question, right? So to answer succinctly, I'd say extracurriculars and PORs are fairly straightforward. All right. Something that I did not cover here, when taking an interview, do not mention something that is already there in your CV or on the interview form, right? Because that tends to be very, very boring and repetitive and just not interesting enough. So you need to stand out. So don't introduce yourself as my name and so. I have studied at so and so school, or I have studied at so and so college, and this is my subject there. No, I think it's a better idea to probably have an introduction like, "Hi, my name is Anand. I'm somebody who enjoys enjoys finance related work. I have interned with 3 companies in the field of finance, and at each place I've learned something new." Which basically also has taught me that in areas that I'm passionate about, I go the extra step in closing it down, in closing the sales down, but also in arresting market trends, right? So you can see that the moment you start talking about your achievements and link them to a particular power word that is your unique selling point, it immediately becomes easier to go to sleep. I think there's a lot of mental peace at the end of yesterday's session, or in fact even today's session. Alright, let's talk about career goals. Well, irrespective of whether it's a job interview or a B-school interview, I think this is one question you will face, right? You should be ready for. What are your career goals? And right up on top, I'm telling you what is it that the interviewer is looking at, right? What exactly is he evaluating? So by asking you a question on career goals, I think the interviewer understands the level of clarity that you have, the maturity of purpose that you have, and the inclination to follow through on your aspirations, right? So career goals are usually evaluated in 3 segments. I would still prefer 2 unless the middle portion is has gone rotten. It's very, in fact, not interview it. So let's talk about career goals, right? So there are 2 aspects of a career. I think everybody understands what a career goal is, right? What do you want to do with life, right? And usually career goals are longer in term, which would probably be between 5 and 10 years, maybe even 10 years. And then you have your medium term goals, basically after pursuing a 2-year PG diploma or an MBA. What is it that you see yourself doing, and what kind of a company would you eventually like to join, whether it's in China or not, right? So a long-term career goal and a short-term career goal, but I think one of the most important things here is that your career goal should be made as specific as possible, right? The more particular you can be about your career aspirations, the better it would be, right? Don't include statements like, I want to become a successful business manager, that is my career. No, that's not a career goal. That's a means to an end, right? A career goal is usually, when I see it on plants, the plants which are done always tend to be pointy. The other 2 things that are important from a career goal perspective are your purpose and your inclination, right? What is purpose? Purpose is, why do you want to study this course, right? what disadvantages or advantages do you see when you apply to this school and the others, right? That is what we call purpose, right? Why do you want to study this course? And an answer for a scope or purpose based question will usually be around the academic skills that you gained in school or college. Right? Look at the answer on your screen. I want to study management in order to get into the domain of finance and investment banking. Great. All right. Besides purpose, then there is the other aspect of an interview, of this interview question, which is inclination. Because most times our decisions are not abrupt; they tend to be thought out. So the fact that you went out and did, let's say, an internship in every semester break, then by the end of 2 years you'll probably, or at the end of the second year, you'll probably have 4 excuse me for that. Well, inclination basically tells me what tells you that you are going to be good at this, right? What tells you that you will adjust and that the new environment won't shake you up. Well, these ones are easier to answer. You need to again show him or her that you can survive in like, for example, what tells me I'm good at finance? Well, I don't know, I've studied BCom honors, and so finance is part of our courses, number one. Number two, I also have deep amount of experience in the field of management, so chances are that you would have come across my profile somewhere else. Right, next up is the section on academics. Do B school interviews, and in fact, I think here's where you can probably draw a distinction between job interviews and B school interviews. Although both of them tend to have academic questions, a job interview tends to have more questions specific to the role that you're applying for. Whereas a B school interview is interested in knowing you in as much detail as they can, and to understand their, your fit into their program, right? That's what irritates me. As you can see, I think with academics there is very little choice that you guys have, right? You must be, when you're applying to a B school, I think something that, every single B school worth its salt will look for is academic consistency and being a high performer, right? And so don't be surprised. I know a lot of students tend to be surprised by the kind of questions that come. Anticipate it, which means that spend at least 2 to 3 weeks, right? As much time as you would prepare. Okay, the wrong analogy. I was about to say prepare as much as you would prepare if there was a term exam coming up. But from my personal experience, I don't think people study during their semester exams, right? So I should think maybe start a week before your actual interview, and make sure that you revise all the basic concepts, all the formulae, and any bit of application from class 11 and class 12 math. But to take a more pragmatic approach, what you could probably do is you could probably start with preparing for 2 main subjects, and then we can drop off by 8 p.m. And well, another question that keeps popping up is that, okay, fine, I know I need to study literature, but well, there's a big difference between simply revising in the form of headlines, right? Revising just the formula, and vis-a-vis, knowing the formula or revising it, but also learning how to apply it in given problem scenarios, right? So make sure that you understand a particular topic in depth. Not sure that that's going to help you any which ways. So make sure that you choose at least one subject which agrees with your undergraduate course of study, right? If you're a commerce student, make sure that you study accounts, that you study economics. But if you're an engineering or a science graduate, maybe choose your discipline of study and make sure that you have 2 to 3 subjects which will offset your GMAT score if it is low, that is. So even if your academic score is low, don't play it on the back foot. Don't say, okay, my back story was boring. Study your basics and make sure that you are able to apply it, because most of the time these interview panelists tend to be quite smart, right? I remember one of the interviews that I took, they made me sit down. I was an engineer when I applied, so they asked me, did I know about motors? And I was like, yes, I have studied motors. I already had this feeling of apprehension in my stomach. And the very next thing that they did was explain to us how this fan works. What kind of a motor is there in a fan and how does it work? Well, I know that most of my engineering friends will be able to answer this. It is a single phase induction motor that is equipped in a fan, and now if indeed another refrain that most people have is, what happens if I don't know the answer to a question, right? What if the interview asks me something which is very tough? Should I answer, or should I just leave it unsaid? Should I just say I don't know, or should I take a guess? Well, thumb rule is don't make a guess. Thumb rule is, if you don't know a particular answer to a particular question, even if you want to make a guess, right? First of all, take a guess only if you're half sure, right? Anything below that level of uncertainty, and you should probably be honest and say you don't know. But if indeed you do know, you're 50% sure that you know the answer, then do be upfront with them and say that, dear sir or madam, can I make a guess, as I'm not exactly sure. I think the answer should be so and so. It's always good to be safe. Remember, your academic performance in the interview is going to be critical, right? They really do want people who are good at academics, but also remember or recall, what they've learned. And finally, those who can apply this in practical, demanding situations. Right, the next section of your interview is probably the most critical section, right? To talk about your positions, whether it was in school, college, or at the company that you work for, your positions of responsibilities and your extracurricular activities, right? Here is where you paint the most favorable picture for an interviewer, right? You tell him, okay, I've held these many positions of responsibilities. That makes me a mature person, that makes me a born leader, and that makes me somebody who rebels working with teams, and so on and so forth. So a very, very critical area in an interview. But when you mention having worked with a club or a society or having worked for a particular event, make sure that you know their specifics in detail, right? Because many a time I come across students who say that, in my college fest, I was responsible for sponsorships. And the very next question is, okay, how much money did you raise? And if I see you fumbling with the answer, then I know that you're not confident because you're probably being untruthful. Similarly, the other question you should probably ask yourself is, was this experience useful? And if so, then when can we talk about it again? Right? Once you know everything that you've done end to end, you should be able to, you should be confident in the ability to justify your role, your responsibility and your achievements, right? And in fact, justify the outcome, right? The better you know the event, the better you'll be able to spell out the outcome, right? So did you do a good job of raising sponsorships? I believe so, sir. I think of the total 1,50,000 that we raised, I managed to raise almost 80,000, right? Which is more than half the money that was raised. So I would say that yes, reaching out to institutions and colleges and trying to raise funds that way was a smart idea from my end. The second question you should ask yourself with regard to personal positions of responsibilities and extracurriculars is, how exactly was it that this experience was important, right? Did you make a self-discovery about yourself? Did you realize that you learned something new in class? Right. So, well, it turns out most of the times in an interview, you want to display characteristics of a leader. And so every time you mention a position of responsibility, you want to take away some aspect that this particular life event brought out in you, right? It usually brings out the realization that you can work well with the team, that you're a creative person, that you're good with convincing or negotiations, right? And so these kind of things, these kind of experiences must definitely be, you need to close the loop on them by not just talking about your experience, but also about what you learned from it and why it was important for you, right? So make sure that you do that. And last but not the least, make sure that you tell the interviewer. First of all, you should identify this for yourself, but it becomes important for you to tell the interviewer how unique your experience was, how differentiable it was when it compared to other candidates. For example, if you say that you competed in an inter-school competition versus you competed on another challenge but at a national level. Well, even though nobody has heard of this challenge, I think by simply portraying the fact that some of the it's much better to give a champion performance at state or national level or even the district level than to do so in an inter-school competition or an intra-school quiz, right? So make sure that you understand the gravity of your contribution. You also understand how unique the experience was and what you learned from it and what were your key takeaways from that particular role or that particular event participation. Right, which brings us to one of the most important questions in an interview, which is, why exactly should we be selecting you? Right? Now remember, this is a question that might not always be verbalized by the panelists. They might not ask specifically for you to answer this, but you must keep this in mind at all times, because if it is indeed a sales pitch, an opportunity for you to present yourself for selection, then you need to make sure that you know exactly what is it that you're good at. That's good about you, in fact. So identify. In fact, you remember when we started off, I said you need to know and identify your unique selling points. What are unique selling points? If not, things that differentiate you from anybody else. They are unique after all, aren't they? So when it comes to why you should be selected, I think this should be a mix of your achievements and your the life events that lead to your realization in you about your personality traits, your most important personality trait, like I'm a good planner, I execute very well, I'm great with time management, I cultivate relationships which really help out there in the future, right? So to know that the person I'm interviewing is unique, I should leave no stone unearthed in identifying a nice way of representing yourself. The suggested approach is to use 3 or 4 adjectives that talk about 3 or 4 very unique, distinct things about your personality, right, that make you unique. But at the same time, you also must you must also show that you're somebody who's receptive to learning and will be diligent in achieving it, right? So for example, in the last year, I had a candidate who was asked this question: why should we select you? And he was the last member in the panel of interviews. So when he walked in, they were anyway tired. So they asked me, okay, and why didn't you go for an interview? So what I'm trying to say is that you should show yourself as somebody who's open to learning, somebody who's adaptable, somebody who has the requisite enthusiasm to learn and evolve. But at the same time, you need to not just know about your strengths and your achievements. You must also identify weaknesses or times when you failed, because most times we find that we tend to learn a lot from our failures, because they tell us exactly what should not be done. But these obviously failures or shortcomings, should only be justified by way of your life events or your major stories. It is after all a storytelling situation, right? So make sure that you know yourself inside out and identify what differentiates you from anybody else. What your strengths and achievements are, but equally important is to know what your weaknesses are and what you have started avoiding, and how that has made a difference in your personality, right? So try making sure that these points are covered. And one last point, which is specific to admission for a particular school or college, is that also think about why should I select you is also partly about what do you bring to the table. What is your contribution to my college, right? How can you contribute? Would it be in terms of only extracurricular activities and sport, or would you also advance the academic learning of our institution? Would you bring diversity, both in thought process and your approach to problem solving? Do you bring something else to the table, right? And whatever you bring to the table would be unique because it comes on the basis of your experiences and your feedback, right? So do make sure that you talk about contribution to the country. It will not well, now that we've crossed the bridge of why should the college or university select you, It's time to also focus on a related question which is why should you be keen to join us, right? Let's say I am a panelist from a B school, say I am Ahmedabad or I am Bangalore, and I ask you at the end of the interview, all right, XYZ, why don't you tell me why you wish to join us, right? Why do you wish to join us? Well, this question will partly have been answered in your career goals, because when you talk about what you want to achieve, then you automatically tend to also talk about what you need to achieve those career goals and how part of that can be, upskilled or obtained by studying management, by doing an MBA. But when it comes to masters and when it comes to some of these applications, why should we select you? Why should you be keen to join us? Must be answered by performing due diligence and due research, right? So make sure that you study the college website, their LinkedIn profile, their social media handles, just so that you're aware, about their events, about their activities that are reported to the outside world. So when you walk in, you must know exactly what kind of events happen there, what kind of papers and projects and live projects have been conducted from my college, from the college that I will join, and so on and so forth. So make sure that the better your research, the more specific your answer will be. Right? Find a reason that is unique to this particular college only, because if you most people tend to be quite open-ended with answering this question. Let's say things like, well, I want to study from the best faculty. Now, I want to study, because I am Bangalore has the best brand, right? Now, these are answers at the opposite ends of the spectrum. One says, I want to join, I am Bangalore because which B school does not have good faculty, and if indeed doesn't have good faculty, then why would you like to join them? But the other point that I made was a little more unique. It was a little more exciting because when you're talking about unique things that compel you to join a particular college, and that can only happen if you genuinely study the website from top to bottom, every single link therein that relates to the MBA or CAT or GMAT syllabus. Similarly, when you're asking about why should you choose to select us, right? Well, it's important to be honest with this question, right? Because many a time, a question that comes up is that if I have 10 calls from 10 different colleges, do I tell them that I have 10 calls? Because won't that mean that they might actually believe that I don't intend to join here, right? Well, let me put your mind at ease. First of all, this. And finally, when I say, okay, let me complete that point quickly. When I say that you must be honest, I think if you have many calls, I think it's a good idea to just tell him those who have those many calls, him or her, that is. But the other fact is that if you do have a high percentile, then you can't really fool the panelist into thinking that you don't have calls, right? So that rarely happens. But to be honest, I think it's a good idea to to send across to talk about the total calls that you have and the reasons why you got those calls, and also about your contingency plan, about an alternative plan in case the main one that you're working on doesn't hold, right? What kind of an alternate site should we create? Should it be a site? Should it be something else? Right? And backup plan is also critical, because what if, and this is a question that gets asked all the time, what if we don't select you for this role? What if we don't select you for this in this college? What do you do then? Because life doesn't stop at that interview. You still need to achieve your career goals. how do you expect to achieve them if this doesn't work out, right? So have an alternative plan. Maybe think about alternate careers or alternate, application options that you would have considered, right? So have a backup plan, have a contingency plan at all times, but make sure that you do your research and come up with some unique points that differentiate this college from the rest. So those could be the reasons why you decide to join them. Obviously, a lot of this will be interest based and might vary from person to person, but I hope that you get the general sense of what I'm trying to say, right? And the thing about why should you choose to join us is that if possible, since this question usually comes up at the fag end of the interview, if possible, do ask them a question, right? Do have a particular question prepared from them, and this could be with regard to the degree that is. I mean, first of all, when you ask them a question, make sure that the answer to that question is not readily available on either their website or on common websites, right? So do not make that assumption, but do not ask them something which is quite straightforward and recoverable for you. The second aspect is that what kind of questions should you ask? Well, make sure that it's an intelligent one. Right? I think theme-based intelligence does indeed, if possible, ask them a question. All right. On that note, I come to the end of this session. I hope that I gave you a flavor on how to approach interview preparation, what are the main areas to prepare for, and what are the typical answers or themes you can explore in creating that kind of an impact. Remember, goes without saying, I think the first step is the most important step, which is knowing yourself. The harder you think and come up with 5 or 3 to 5 unique adjectives that describe you, the better the better it would be for you, for your chances in the interview, right? All right. On that note, let me quickly also tell you about the kind of flexibility that comes through the Unacademy platform. It's flexible schedules, flexibility in terms of the language that you can use. You can see that you can learn in English or Hindi or other regional languages also, and all of this learning can happen anytime on any platform, on any mobile device, and at any number of times, right? There is no restriction on your learning once you subscribe. The other advantage is also in terms of interactability, right? It's a very interactive platform. I think the focus is always to improve and improve and improve and make sure that learners can interact with educators, right? So this happens in the form of doubts that you can ask on chats. You can in fact even post screenshots of your question on the screen, and once that question pops up, the educator can share that with the rest of the classroom, so you could answer that question. In fact, the educator can also ask questions and create live polls so that he can gauge whether you're understanding the topic or not, and if he feels the need to, he can probably slow down at that point. The final bit is it's not just about learning, it's also about testing yourself and benchmarking yourself. So you can take live tests, you can take tests, mock tests, and practice tests, and view detailed reports and analysis for the same, and more importantly, whatever you learn, whichever classes you attend, the faculty notes and PDFs are usually available for download when you're learning on the Plus platform, right? So it's like I said, it's a very unique platform. It's high on interactiveness and it's very, very high on outcome orientation. These are the subscription plans that will help you to access the plus batches and courses. As you can see, this spans across subscription duration, right? 1 month all the way till 24 months. And for these plans, you get a 10% discount if you use my subscription code. That's AV01. You directly get a 10% discount. Right? So what are you waiting for? Go download the app today, and together I'm sure we can crack not just the written test, but also interviews and essay writing sections, right? So do like, share and subscribe. Thank you for your time. Have a great day, and I'll see you very, very soon in another session. Bye.